70-year-old Meena Mukherjee has a rare medical condition. It has been over a month since Meena was admitted to a Delhi hospital. Today, she's paralyzed neck down.
She's immobile. She's like in a coffin inside her body, which is very painful. She can't bear to be touched. She can't reposition herself. And she's alert. So she feels it. You ask her anytime, how are you? She'll say pain. She spells it out. She tries to mouth it, but we can't always read it. But she'll always say pain, or she'll just do like this.
On 9th of March 2018, the highest constitutional court of India declared that right to die with dignity is a fundamental right. The landmark ruling also gave legal sanction to passive euthanasia under strict guidelines. In a first in the country, people can now draw their own living will.
Yes, she would have written a living will here. She would very definitely have, because after she had her cardiac arrest, she mentioned it several times that I should have died, I want to die. And she said that since. But that is not enough, because that is a very sick person talking. If we had it when she was not so sick, that would be a more clear opinion.
The financial strain of critically ill patients is a burden that families have to bear. In the case of Meena Mukherjee, she's totally dependent on her daughter and her sister.
First in ICU, it was over 1 lakh a day. And now they reduced her category, after our telling them of our problem. We don't have that many resources. I've borrowed from friends here. And of course, it's a huge burden.
The economic impact is huge. We are witness to it every day as doctors. Families have got destroyed. They pawn even their jewelry. They sell their farmland. They sell property. To what purpose? You're doing no good to the patient. Actually, you're giving him a very poor death, poor quality death. And to the family, you are not even measuring what you're doing.
Intensive care units in any hospital have patients fighting for life. Most of them recover. There are many who won't. And it's a matter of till when can Medicare prolong life?
That dignity issue is more to do with autonomy, and it's an aspiration, and it's a very important aspiration. But hospitals can also not necessarily live up to their dignities. A urinary bag down one side, 3 tubes down your throat. You get what's called ICU anxiety, or where you feel claustrophobic. This is not really dignity. So it's ambiguous.
Withdrawal or withholding life support has been practiced by doctors in cases of futility of care after taking the family in confidence. But it is not an easy decision.
My father suffered more than a decade, in terrible circumstances. They said, no, there's no chance of his organs reviving. And my decision was instantaneous, and I said, please don't continue with the life support systems anymore. They switched it off immediately. And for the first time in my life, I saw my father's face relax, the pain ease out of his body. And for the first time, I found him at peace. And I must say, as his son, I felt a huge relief in his death. I felt as if a huge dark cloud had lifted from him and from me.
Living will is essentially a document that sets out a person's wishes regarding how they would want to be treated if they get terminally ill. One can now choose to refuse life support in case there is no hope of revival of good health. And anyone with stable and sound mind can get a living will made.
They say you must have not just 2 witnesses like with any other will. You should have I think a judge also, then it should go to a council who will decide. Now the time element between you and me, ordinary probates and all take months, if not years, depending on the case.
Right to die with dignity has been considered an integral part of right to live. But when is it that a person can be considered fully and finally dead? Is it when one's heart stops functioning, or one's brain, or one's lungs? The advancements in medical technologies have made death to be more of a process than a definitive point.
Once we got to know how to revive a heart, how to breathe air into the lungs, then was born intensive care. Prior to that, people died without these interventions. So death has got changed with the evolution of science reflected in intensive care. That is why death has got to be unnatural now.
The complex issue of death and the ambiguity of surrounding makes the process of letting go difficult. The choice of withdrawal of life support to a patient comes with moral baggage and guilt for the family.
Because there is a life support system which can extend life, it becomes difficult for doctors sometimes and for families to discuss withdrawal of life support, because there is this magic that has been associated with advanced medicine, which is not true. There is no magic in it. There is a certain methodology, and there is certain people we will be able to save, and there are certain we cannot save.
Withdrawing of life support to a terminally ill patient, termed as passive euthanasia, has been a welcome judgment seen by many. The term euthanasia itself does trigger strong opinions on medical and ethical fronts.
I think it's the word euthanasia is misused here, because euthanasia is a deliberate act to lead to premature death. But there's no such thing here. What they're saying is let life take its normal course. Let people have the right to decide how they would like their final days to be.
The face of euthanasia in the country was a nurse, Aruna Ramachandra Schonborg of Mumbai. 25-year-old Aruna was attacked and raped at the hospital where she worked. She was left blind, deaf, and paralyzed. Aruna lived in a vegetative state for 42 years. Activist Pinky Virani filed a plea to withdraw life support as she believed it was causing Aruna a great deal of pain. Aruna's case set the ball rolling for legal changes to follow.
In the upholding of what is called the Aruna Schonborg judgment, which is the 2011 judgment, the 5-judge constitutional bench has gone one step further even. It takes the right to life, which is Article 21, and with it, it adds the right to die with dignity, to the degree that this particular judgment also talks about a right to refuse bodily invasions. The passive euthanasia law which she brought was denied to her, but granted to all of India. So in a sense, she became India's next friend, in a sense.
In 2011, the Supreme Court had ruled that Aruna could die provided her next of kin took the decision. As Aruna had no living kin, it was legally agreed that the long-time nurses taking care of Aruna were her next of kin, and they decided against letting Aruna go. On 18th of May 2015, 66-year-old former nurse Aruna Schonborg died unaided in the same hospital where she had lived for more than 4 decades. Three months after Aruna Schonborg died of natural causes in Mumbai, the Rajasthan High Court banned Santhara, a centuries-old Jain practice of starving oneself to death to attain salvation. Rights activists had for long campaigned against the practice, comparing it to suicide, euthanasia, and even sati.
If you give it a label, if you call it suicide, I think it's wrong. It's a traditional institution sanctioned by not just their holy men, but even by their texts, so theologically sanctioned, because of their very approach to life. It's so much a part of their overall cosmology.
The Rajasthan High Court verdict came in response to a public interest petition moved in 2006 by a rights activist, after several acts of Santhara stirred a national debate that year. Bimla Devi Bhansali was 60 years old and diagnosed with terminal cancer when she and her family announced with much fanfare that she would fast to death.
It's understandable in the socio-historical economic context of that period when these religions developed. It's still understandable to a certain extent, but it's an evolved thought. But also the fact is that medical care has reached a certain point where I think a good quality life is achievable for a fairly prolonged period, and I think it can be a very productive life.
Rights activists alleged that while Bimla Devi's relatives had publicly announced it was her own decision, in her final hours, the frail woman had appeared to have made a last-ditch request for food and water. It was claimed by the activists that Bimla Devi's voice was drowned out by the bhajans being sung around her, as she died after a 13-day fast.
हम बाधक नहीं बनना चाहते कि भाई लास्ट विश है, मेरा धर्म है कि इसको जो इसका मन हो पूर्ति करो. तब इन्होंने संधारा ले लिया, हमने इसका रेस्पेक्ट किया.
In Rajasthan that year, 4 people died within a 5-week period when rights activists Nikhil Soni filed his PIL in court. But after massive protests organized by the Jain community, the apex court stayed the Rajasthan High Court judgment. Three years after the Santhara debate had the country debating on individuals' right to death, the Supreme Court of India allowed passive euthanasia, in layman's terms, meaning the pulling of life support, differentiating it from active euthanasia, which means ending the life of a patient with a lethal dose.
An elderly person, society should be responsible for their care at the end of their lives, and they should not be allowed to die just because they believe that they will, they cannot take care of themselves. Okay. Having said that, there will be a subset of people who would fear that they become so disabled at the end of their lives that they are dependent on other people.
Narayan is 88 years old and Iravati, his wife, 78. And they might seem like any neighborhood elderly couple going about their daily activities. But there is a difference. The Lavate couple of South Mumbai's Chandni Road has written to the president seeking mercy killing.
When the constitution gives the fundamental right to live, in that we read that fundamental right of death is also there.
The Lavates do not have any children or relatives to bank upon if any serious ailments knock on their door. And as in India, active euthanasia is illegal, they want their case to be the exception. For them, the right to die with dignity is saying goodbye to their world when their faculties are still fully functional. Some may term the state agreeing to such a request as assisted suicide, but in different parts of the world, it is legal. In 2002, the Netherlands became the first country to legalize euthanasia and assisted suicide. It imposed a strict set of conditions. The illness must be incurable, the patient should be suffering unbearable pain, and should make the demand in full consciousness.
Now, why Netherlands agreed to medically assisted suicide is because they were having too much of an aging population. It's completely inverse in India, and they are a socialist society, taking care of them, keeping them quote unquote alive. The state took a decision.
In 2002, that is the same year as the Netherlands, Belgium legalized active euthanasia, becoming the second country to do so. In Switzerland, Italy, and Germany, some forms of assisted suicide is not a crime, and 5 states in the USA have legalized physician-assisted suicide. Internationally, there are also organizations that specialized in assisting suicides for its members. The Lavates too are members of such a society which has helped over 2,000 people end their lives with dignity.
If in the developed world you need to give up technology in the bulk of the people facing end of life, it should be the same everywhere else. Because death, dying and its requirements are the same. What is the quality of death we are providing, and why? We are providing poor quality of death because we have not looked at how people are dying and whether we can improve it. So our country needs it even more than countries with cutting edge care.
In death, as with other important facts of life, it is quality that matters. And at the end of it all, India, it seems, is a bad place to die in. In a 2015 survey across 80 countries covering 5 parameters, India is placed 67th.
What used to happen when people in the fullness of years died, they did so at home in the company of their own people, and there was aesthetics about it. There was a spiritual dimension to it, which is completely gone.
The World Health Organization defines palliative care as an approach that improves quality of life of terminally ill patients and their families through prevention and relief of suffering. It is the holistic approach to alleviate not only physical pain but psychosocial and spiritual agony, vital to improve quality of death and the right to die with dignity.
It's care that looks at the entire person rather than just at the disease. So you're looking at the psychosocial side, the spiritual side, the medical, the nursing side, and I think that is more comprehensive care. It's a holistic approach, one which will help the patient and the family deal with the crisis much better. So I think this is really medicine at its best.
It is the emotional distress that patients with advanced life-limiting illnesses and their loved ones face that is of vital importance. In India, experts say there is an immediate need to switch focus from futile treatment at hospitals to palliative or end-of-life care.
Often there's a fairly strong opinion from people that they don't want to die in hospital. I've known of at least 3-4 such cases. But the family members have felt an obligation.
We are scared of death and dying. We don't want to face it. And that's a shame, because the only way we can ensure that finally our final days will be days of quality is if we face this squarely and talk about it.
People have very different reactions to hospitals, even while they are ill or getting old and so on. So I think it will definitely affect the morality of caregiving and dying.
Life has to end, and to change that is beyond the scope of life itself. All that people are seeking is the right to a life of dignity and the right to a dignified death. The debate may rage for long between customs and individual choices, but the beginning of the end can start with a simple conversation about one's will on how to die.
Thanks for watching the video. For more such news and updates, please like, share and subscribe to India Today. Also check out our other great videos from our channel. We know you would love to.